Hey, what is going on everyone? It's TCG here, and before we start this video, I just wanted to make a special announcement. For those of you that have followed me from the start, you may already know this, but 6 months ago, I went through what was quite a difficult transitional period in my life. I was let go from a job that was very stressful, and because of that stress of being let go and just trying to figure out how to stay afloat, I underwent a lot of health issues from my stress, but then actually it was through that where I was able to kind of really concentrate and focus on TCG, both in the custom card brand as well as a content creator. And man, through the help and support of this wonderful community, I was not only able to stay afloat, but able to also grow the brand into levels that I didn't even dream possible. And yeah, I've been much happier these last 6 months working with just all of my amazing supporters, being able to meet the community, whether it was through locals, through regionals, through online events even. And I've been happier these last few months than I've ever been working in my 12 years of my corporate career. All this to say, right? So because of that, I actually am deciding to pursue this as my full-time career and to really take TCG to the next level. And however, this does bring upon quite a few new challenges as far as how to grow the business and how to make it to the next level while supporting my family. And so, after much thinking and conversation with respected colleagues, as well as even my supporters and my community, I've decided to launch a Patreon for TCG. And so, to me, this is the happy medium. When I thought about what was most important to me, it was to maintain a close connection with my supporters. You guys have been so awesome. I can't thank you enough for how cool you guys have been over the last few months. So I wanted to stay connected with my community while also receiving support and rewarding my supporters for that support too. And so this felt like a good medium in which I can channel time and effort into growing that aspect of it as well. And so it's a platform in which I can offer my supporters not some great discounts, but also additional things like the free Dawn of the Month card. And so I'll put it up on the screen. This month we have the Smoker Dawn available, and so it'll be free with any purchase on the site as long as you're a Patreon member. And each month I'll be releasing a new Dawn card or a new Dawn of the Month, and hopefully they'll become one series of cards after the 10 months. But I'm also going to be doing other things like exclusive cards for Patreon, as well as giving a much stronger voice to you, my community, as far as the direction of the designs and cards being released, but also just the future of the brand as well, right? And so I do always want to caveat this though, for those that want to support but don't have the financial means to, please do not stretch yourself thin. Pay your bills, pay your obligations. That's always a must, but feel free to join as a free subscriber too, right? I do have a free Patreon tier as well, because I do want to include you into the community. And so don't think just because you can't join as a supporter financially doesn't mean you can't be a supporter community-wise, right? And so the goal of this is honestly to create that community as well as fulfill both goals of raising the financial support needed for the business, but also rewarding the supporters for just their time, their effort, and whatever support that they give. And so again, I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. I'm really excited to be launching this, and so links will be in the description below. But yeah, just thank you so much for these last few months, this last year. It has been quite an amazing journey. I can't imagine it without all of you guys. And so yeah, with that being said, let's get back to the video. All right, let's get into it. So this is a tier list maker that I just found. Someone had compiled the 8.5 version of the tier list maker, and so we're just gonna go ahead with it. If there's any leaders missing, I apologize. I tried to triple check, but since they weren't in order by the sets that came out, I think they're in order by name. It makes it a little difficult, and so if there are leaders missing, I'm sorry. I tried to triple check, but I'm human. But the way we're gonna approach this is normally I kind of used to go in order, I think, but I kind of want to approach it this way, where we define the S tier leaders, right? Like the kind of like the top of the top, and from those leaders we can start now comparing and making that the baseline when we rank the other leaders, right? And so the reason I'm doing that is because oftentimes the S tier decks are the most represented, meaning you will run into them in the larger events, and they will be a foe that you have to kind of deal with. And they often are the ones that gatekeep other decks, right? And so there exists formats where certain leaders are really strong, but they just happen to be weak against the S tier decks. And so because of that, the leader falls down in tier, right? Not to say that the leader sucks altogether, but because of that current meta, that leader is no longer just kind of viable, right? And so case in point, we kind of saw that with Red Green Law, right? Like when it was a menace for a while, but then now that other decks have a means to pop smaller bodies quite consistently, Red Green Law lost a ton of its power, right? And so yeah, anyway, all that to say, let's go tier the S tiers first. So I'm gonna put, I guess, the top 3 decks that I think will remain in the S tier, and then I'll think about ordering them in the top. So Dofi, definitely one of the big boogeymen of the set that we have going on right now. With the new support that it got from the starter decks, it is absolutely wild, right? So you got the Jinbei being able to play out the Weevil, which was bad in 7, but then now they have access to like the Boa that allows you to reorder the top while giving a Rested Dawn. You have the Law that bounces, and then you conjunction that with the Jozu. It's just a lot of board control by bouncing back to your opponent's hands while flooding the board at the same time. And so that concept in itself is really strong. And as you flood the board, right, you're most likely playing from your deck rather than your hand, meaning that you're able to keep a relatively healthy hand size while maintaining a wide board for your opponent to deal with. And so that all being said, that makes it remain quite strong. I do think the other contenders is still BY Luffy. I know the meta diversified a little bit more, but I do think that this deck is still a top deck. It has a good matchup into the Dofi, and still has a good matchup into Lucci, which I think the way Lucci techs now, it actually may have a slightly worse matchup into BY Luffy because it's trying to tech against Dofi. And so I do think that this still will remain S tier. And speaking of Lucci, I think Lucci is our last S tier leader. Even with the changes that we got, I do think, or with the updates that we got for the starter decks, this deck still remains quite strong. And so if I had to order them, so we haven't seen Dofi, like, I don't think Dofi took an event just yet. Or no, it did. Jackson Huang did. But I think people are still learning it. I think there's many people on the deck, but a lot of people figuring out the nuances, because this deck is actually really, really playline intensive, right? There's so many options that you can do and have and adjust and flex. And so I think as the meta progresses, more and more Dofi players will become more and more difficult to play against, Kind of like how we saw with Lucci in the beginning, or BY Luffy in the beginning, right? People were still getting used to all the different lines that they have. But once they start to master that, I think it'll be even more of a menacing deck than it has been. And so this will be our S tier so far. I think it'll just be these three unless I find a reason to go add another one in there. But yeah, maybe Luigi can be 1.5. I don't know. I'm still deciding about that, but I do think that these are the top of the top. So with that being said, we can use that as a baseline and kind of go in order. Red Ace. So Red Ace got a lot of new toys, because they had the Whitebeard starter deck, and so that 7-cost Newgate is really cool. Does a lot, but I still think it'll struggle against decks like BY Luffy and Lucci because Sabo exists and Sabo's a thing. And so I don't want to put in. I'm going to put it in Rogue, right? I do think, and maybe it's a soft spot that I have for this ace, but I kind of want to see someone at least top 32 with this deck. I think it does have a pretty good matchup actually into Dofi, right? And so as long as you can dodge these other two, I think you can sneak in there, but we'll see. Blue BY Ace, I think it's a locals only deck. I know people are like, it's been getting more and more support actually. When you think about OP8, we got a lot of the blue Whitebeards that like look at the top of the deck and reorder like the first two, or like draw two, put two on top or something like that. But I do think it still is missing one or two key things that may help it to pop off. Every time I've tried to make it work, it just doesn't feel consistent enough to quite run. And so with that being said, I'm going to keep it locals only. Arlong, I do think it's locals only too. Concept similar to Dofi, but you're just always playing from hand. I know that there are some aggressive lines that I think can catch your opponents off guard, but in the grand scheme of the top S tier decks, I think it falls short quite a bit. I'm going to put Yellow Mom in locals only too. I don't think there's much explanation needed for that. Bonnie, I think, is a very strong 1.5. With what's on the meta, when you look at the top, I think, again, Bonnie still has a really good shot into BY Luffy, which remains an S tier deck. Bonnie, actually, the way that Dofi built out their deck now, I do think Bonnie has a better time against this iteration of Dofi than the previous ones, right? And so we're seeing like them running less Red Rocks, less Gravity Blades, and maybe sometimes a split between the two. And so I do think that Bonnie did get a slight buff because of how these decks are adjusting for each other. And so we're going to keep it 1.5. Purple Yellow Croc, I'm going to put in locals only. I think this deck is a stall deck, but it'll just fold to Dofi. Blue Croc, oof. Yeah, I'm going to put an oof. I don't think this leader is that good anymore. It was like only good in set 4 when they first introduced Red Rock, right? But and the Soge King, but after that it kind of or was it set 5? I don't remember. I'm having brain fart. I think it was set 4, but yeah, I'm gonna put Blurple Croc in locals only. Don't think it's that great right now. Same with the Grape Dofi and Dragon. Enel. So I think Enel actually got a pretty good boost with the cards that are available to it. It deals with a lot. It has so much KO potential now, right? Because you have the Nami from Egghead, you have the Luffy from Egghead, you have Gadatsu, you have the Egghead Bonnie also really helps, like being able to if your opponent takes a life, draw 2, trash 1. It just keeps your hand size big. So I do think that it has a good matchup into Dofi, and because of that, it kind of like went up a tier. Otherwise, I do think it would have fallen down a tier, but I think it's really strong right now. I think it's a little bit of a sleeper pick. I think you can definitely get caught off guard. It also has a really good matchup into Purple Luffy too, which has been seeing a lot more representation ever since the starter deck. And so we'll keep it at 1.5 for now. Foxy, dude, I'm not a Foxy believer. Some people are really saying this deck is good, but I think you just play Purple Luffy. Don't at me. Yo, is it bad if I put Garp and Rogue? It can't be Rogue, right? So Garp, ironically, is like really good, I think, into the Dofi matchup. I don't put it in Rogue. I think like Garp has a pretty decent chance into the Dofi matchup just based off of kind of how it's played, right? Because you get double value of whenever you attach a Don, you get to minus a cost on something. So like you can pop something on the board and then swing pretty big into it, big into something else, and then you're kind of maintaining board control and board state that way. I think most people are just playing this as a pure black though. It being a 4-life leader kind of hurts it a lot. If they made Garp that leader ability and just a mono black leader, I think he'd be in the top tiers. But again, red and black aren't a great color combination. It's just awkward altogether. Boa, I think it's a solid tier 2. I think a lot of people overlook Boa because of Dofi, and somewhat rightfully so, right? Because Dofi can do what Boa can do, but also just not go down on hand size. But I guess you can argue Boa cannot go down on hand size because he's just drawing anytime you're bouncing. So yeah, I do think Boa is actually quite good too. I think she just gets overlooked a lot because of Dofi. But I do plan on making an 8.5 update on Boa because I really like this leader. Just being able to draw whenever you're at 5 cards and you bounce something or remove something from field rather. You're doing what blue wants to do, but getting rewarded for it. And so Hannibal, I'm gonna put in locals only. I think I saw someone like posting a few lists of this on Twitter saying they've been winning their locals with this leader, but every time I play this leader or play against it, it feels underwhelming. Bella Betty, I think locals only too. I think when she high rolls, but I think she still has consistency issues at this point in the game. That may change in the future set as more support gets released. Hody Jones, locals only. This deck is interesting. It cooks other green decks, but then again, the only other green deck is Bonnie. I think it just loses to everything else. So Iceberg, locals only. There's going to be a ton of locals only because I don't want to put many in oof tier. Actually, I don't think Croc should be in oof tier either. I don't think it's Isho, locals only. Ivankov, locals. Kaido, locals. Blurper, Kaido, locals. Alright, so we have Katakuri. Katakuri definitely got buffed, right? He definitely has more tricks up his sleeves than he used to, but I still think he's tier 2. I don't think he's quite as good as Enel at this iteration. I think he can stall out longer, but I still think he just dies to the top decks. Yeah, sad day for Katakuri. I think he's just a solid tier 2 leader. I think you'll be able to get some wins in regionals, but I don't see it getting into top 8. But I could be wrong. But yeah, Red Purple Kid, S tier, right? Has to be S tier. It's a multicolored leader with 5 life that can attack. How can it not be S tier? Yeah, no, it's probably locals only. Even with the support it gets next set, I think it gets outshined by other decks, and so sad day. But I do think it's a little rough right now for Red Purple Kid. Green Kid, also in locals only. Man, it's interesting to see this green leader just staying in the locals only for so long after it's been such a menace. But King will go to oof. Kinemon, I'm gonna say oof. No, Kinemon actually can go here. Ironically. Kuro. We got Kairos. Locals only. Red Green Law. Yeah, I still think Red Green Law hard loses and gets gate kept by the Luchis. I think it still has a really hard time with the BY Luffy too. Against Dofi, I'm gonna put it in Rogue though. I do think. Oh man, yeah, we'll put it in Rogue. It doesn't feel right to put it in the locals only, but it has some hard matchups into the top S tier decks. But I think it actually has some decent matchups into some of the other decks, and so yeah, we'll keep it at that. Ooh, Red Purple Law, RIP, rest in peace. There should be another tier for rest in peace, but Black Luffy, as much as it pains me, the starter 8 Black Luffy, which is my favorite Black Luffy, is definitely a locals only. His ability just isn't that relevant in our current meta, where like getting a rested on whenever you KO something, like because board like so much of the meta is flooding, right? Like these guys all flood in the top. You KOing one thing and then just like slightly swinging higher, like it just doesn't matter as much anymore. Like it mattered a lot more in like the Whitebeard meta, because like you're playing one thing and then you're kind of like boom, that's it, right? But so being able to KO one thing and then swing a little bit higher meant like you were able to kind of trade more cards out of your opponent's hand or be more aggressive into their life or their board, and so. But with so much flooding going on, it doesn't matter. Starter 14 Luffy, probably 1.5. It's black, has a pretty good, decent generic effect, and it can play Moria. Its generic effect is just much better than the starter 8 Luffy's generic effect for the current meta. Purple Luffy. So you guys might disagree with me. I think he's tier 2 right now. I don't even think he's 1.5. And the reason being, he doesn't have his full kit yet, right? And so I think Purple Luffy loses to Enel, loses to BY Luffy, loses to Dofi. Definitely loses to Dofi. That's a really hard matchup. Maybe goes 50-50 with Lucci, or maybe 55% Lucci, 45% Purple Luffy. I think he's the top of tier 2. Yeah, I just think right now his playlines are very linear. You either have it or you don't. There's not a lot of flexibility in the plays that you're playing, in my opinion. It's not like the previous iteration of Purple Luffy, right, where you have this like toolkit of like the Page 1 ulti package, you have like the Bone Clay into Poly package, you have the Magellan package. Like you have like a toolkit of your arsenal, and like you can like kind of flex the deck to cater to your opponent's deck. But right now it's more of a deck that wants to play on its curve, meaning you want to see like your Zoro into your Luffy Taro into Sanji, and you want to just flood the board. But I think it does struggle against the top tier decks, and so I think it does go up for sure once set 9 comes out, but in this iteration, I'm going to keep it in 2. Red Luffy, you're locals only, sir. Red Green Luffy, locals only. Red Purple Luffy. Oh, man. I think he just loses to many decks. I'm going to put in Rogue. I'm going to put top of Rogue. I think it's strong. I think it's almost there. I think set 9 will give it its last little push up to the higher tiers, but it still is so draw dependent, right? You either see it or you don't. So I think it has a really high ceiling potential as far as if you high roll, but then it's not as consistent, in my opinion. And a deck with a 3 life leader has to be quite consistent, and so Blue Luffy, we'll put in locals only. Purple Magellan, locals only. Oopsie. Sorry about that, guys. Marco definitely got better. I'm going to put him in tier 2. Only thing with Marco is I think he struggles into Dofi. Even with the removal that he's seeing, just Dofi being able to constantly replenish the board. And maybe he even does struggle against some of the black decks too, but yeah, we're going to put him in tier 2. Kalgara, I want to put Kalgara in Rogue. I think it's good, but it's almost like a slightly worse Dofi, right? And so, Chopper, locals only. Carrot, ironically, I think Carrot's pretty decent right now. We're going to put it in tier 2. I think she has good plays into Dofi, decent plays into Bonnie and Purple Luffy. I think she still struggles pretty hard against Lucci. I think she might do okay into Black Yellow. Yeah, I think she's pretty okay into Black Yellow. So I think she has like some like rogue type matchups, but I do think like she'll get cooked by Lucci. I could be wrong on that, chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. Moria, I think is always going to be kind of decent. It has a strong, consistent kit, but I would say it's more rogue than tier 2 now. Nami's in tier 2. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Nami in top 16, top 32, top 16. I'd be more surprised seeing in the top 8. I'd want to know what the matchup spreads were, but she does pretty well into everything but Purple Luffy and Dofi. And so if you can dodge those two, I think you have a pretty good shot. But I think we're seeing more and more BY Luffy playing Ace as well. But I still think you are kind of 50-50 into these other decks, and so there's a chance at top. Odin, we're going to put in locals only. Whitebeard, even with the new package, I think we just keep it locals only. And locals only is not in tier order. And yeah, I don't feel like putting it in order. Red, green, Odin, locals only. Perona. Perona. Does Perona just die to Dofi? I actually haven't had too much experience with, I know my boy Tristan plays it, but I haven't played against him in locals in a while. I haven't got to pick his brain as much, but I wonder if it just folds to Dofi. But we're going to put it in Rogue for now, because I do think that this is always kind of going to be a strong deck, especially as more support comes out for it. BY, Big Mom, we're going to put it in locals only. Pudding, oh man, how Pudding has fallen. Yeah, I think Pudding just gets cooked by Dofi. I'm going to put it in Rogue, though. It doesn't feel right to put it in locals only. I think Pudding has a decent shot into some of the other decks, but I'm pretty sure it gets cooked by both Dofi and Purple Luffy. So we'll put it in Rogue. Queen, I'm going to put locals only. Rebecca, locals only. Reiju. I think Reiju has fallen quite a bit too. But if it high rolls, it does do pretty well. We'll put it in tier 2. The end of tier 2. I don't think it's... I think it definitely lost a lot of its power going up against certain decks. But if it high rolls, it does do quite well. It's one of those decks that really relies on seeing stage kind of early to kind of set up your trash and pick up the pieces that you're going to want. Lucci, locals only. Rosinante, locals only. Sabo. Yeah, I think there exists a Sabo deck that does pretty well. But does he just get cooked by Dofi? That's always my question. Does it just get cooked by Dofi being a 4-life leader? We'll put it in Rogue for now. I do think that there's something there with these, both Sabos actually. But yeah, we have Sakazuki in locals only. We have Oof Sakazuki. We have the other Oof Sakazuki. We have the Oof Sanji. Actually, put him in locals only. Shanks goes in Oof. Smoker, my boy Smoker. All right, Smoker S tier. Smoker S tier. No, Smoker is definitely tier 2. Tier 2 or tier 1? No, not even 1.5. I think it's tier 2. I think very strong into certain matchups, but I think overall his matchup spread's not quite as good as something like a Lucci. But the TCG is fantastic. I love the TCG, dude. Just how much you can. There was like a game I played the TCG like 6 times because I just kept on grabbing it back from my Rebecca, and it was nasty. It was so good. Green Uta definitely got a power spike, but I think it's more rogue. It's just still not fully there. Well, there's so many in the rogue deck tier. And you know, like for me, like I think the reason why you're seeing so many in like the tier 2 and rogue is because I think I'm a little bit biased towards like saying a leader is just not great, right? I think that there's a lot of underexploredness that's happening in the tier 2s and the rogues, right? Because we have, if you think about the pie of people playing One Piece, you get so many people playing the top decks, so we get a lot of information on how these decks interact with each other. But then once you start moving towards like the end of tier 2 towards rogue, we have a lot less percentage of people playing these decks, and so there's a lot less testing, a lot less information, a lot less variance of trying different iterations, and so there could be stuff here, and maybe the testing of this would actually bump them down into locals only. But for me, I like to like think about it more like the benefit of the doubt. Red Uta is definitely an oof leader. Red Purple Uta will put it in locals only. Freaking Egghead, dude. Vegapunk 1.5. I think previous to this last week's Treasure Cup, I might have put Vegapunk as a rogue deck or middle of tier 2. Because there are a few people in locals that have been cooking with this deck, and I do see how potentially strong it is. But man, like the newest iteration seemed really scary. I was watching gameplay of the Treasure Cup, and this looks really good. And so, yeah, definitely 1.5 for me. It has good matchups into a lot of the top decks, surprisingly, right? And so, and I think it requires a know-how from your opponent on how to play against it and how to capitalize. Otherwise, it starts to get out of hand, right? You have like these windows of opportunity to kind of pressure the Vegapunk. Kind of like the Enel, right? Like in the late game, like they're gonna always just kind of out-tempo you if they see their top end. And so, yeah, I think it's similar with Vegapunk on how to approach that game. And yeah, it seems 1.5 to me. VV, I think is a locals only. It had some success in 7, but I think now it's looking quite grim with everything that's available. Yamato, we'll put... So we did see people cooking with Yamato at 8, but now with Dofi being so prevalent, I do think it's a little harder for Yamato because they're playing so many blockers, so many... Yeah, I think they're either... I think it's Rogue now at this point. But maybe, again, maybe I'm wrong with that. Comment below if you think I am. We have the yellow Yamato. We're going to put it in locals only. Don't think that this leader quite has what it needs. Z, we'll put in locals only. Blue, green, Sanji, Zoro. It has a lot of cool tricks, but I think it just gets outshined now. And so I'm going to put it in locals only. Zoro, I'm going to still put in tier 2, bottom of tier 2. I think people were really on this deck and then all of a sudden off of it. And so I do think it's quite strong. I think it struggles into Dofi, but I think you can kind of rush down the Dofi as well if you kind of see the right cards at the right time. And so I'm going to put an end of tier 2. I could be wrong, but I do think that there's still stuff here in this deck. And then lastly, we have PRB Sanji. I'm going to put in a Rogue. I think this leader is really good in concept, but in practice, I think it does still fall a little bit short into what's the top tier decks. But maybe it's just because I haven't seen the right builds for it yet. But yeah, in all of my testing, it felt like I was trying to explain this to a friend. In a meta that's heavy flood, And if you don't have some defensive things like, you know, regain your life, or triggers that KO the things in the flood, or things that rest a body like this Bonnie, being able to just rush with something on the board doesn't exactly trade you enough in the flood meta. And so you're like playing out something, rushing with it, swinging with Sanji for, you know, less on. And then if they can answer that body back, they're usually playing 2 bodies, and then you just get out tempoed eventually. But I don't know, maybe there's just some other iterations that haven't been found where they can KO on attack or something like that we haven't fully tested. But anyway, that's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Honestly, 8.5 feels like a slight extension of really 8, and therefore feels like an extension of 7, if that makes sense. Because I guess the only real new decks that we're kind of seeing are the Dofi and maybe the purple Luffy, but again, purple Luffy does feel a little lackluster to me. Aside from that, like, we don't see too many, like, you know, OP8 leaders, maybe, aside from like every now and then a Marco and a Carrot. And so a lot of the meta, I guess Smoker is the arguable other new fresh take that we see. And so yeah, I don't know, it does feel like quite another extension of that 7.5, where it's just like you either have Moria or Dofi, right? And so that's just kind of been my take on this. I'm really excited for 10 or 9 rather, because OP9 is where everything really shifts again, and so really excited to see that happen. And so let me know what you guys think. I will be hosting some more One Piece events. I have some products that are coming in, and so we'll be doing maybe a box tournament or maybe a double box tournament, so be on the lookout for that. But thank you so much for watching. Attica TCG out.